Yeah. Same thing went through my head when you said that. What?
Ready, Freddie? Are you ready, Miss Freddie? All right. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody in here today. We are going to get our Road and Drainage District Governing Body meeting to order. It is 4:01 p.m. Those present are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Carasone, Commissioner Emmerich. We have our City Attorney, Amber Slayton, City Manager, Pete Lear, our City Clerk, Ms. Wong, along with Chief of Police back here, Garrison, and Chief Titus for Fire. So, welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you. If you could, would we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Emmerich. You wouldn't mind.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. If I could get an approval of the agenda, please.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Carasone, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Let's take a vote.
We're too fast again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously. We'll move on to public comment. Vice Mayor, do you have anything? All right. Ms. Fisher, if you wouldn't mind, please. You have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Always keeps my time. My name is Nancy Fisher. I live on North Step Street in off of Price Boulevard. And I just want to mention to you, again, that the 5-lane design that you have planned for Price Boulevard, there's no safety islands or mid-block crosswalks in the design. I looked at how this might have come about, and apparently it was not moved by the commission in the meeting, May meeting. You did not read, although you had several motions and consensus items leading up to that over the months, at that meeting you did not move to include safety islands and mid-block crosswalks. Now, I met with DPW and Mr. Lear, and they're making an attempt to retrofit them, but it looks as though there'll be very few and far between because apparently it's necessary in a 35-mile-per-hour traffic pattern to have 165 feet of deceleration room so that people can turn into their driveways. So the design prioritizes driveways over every other user in the road because people are going to be coming out of their driveways, crossing 2 lanes of traffic, shooting across that turn median, trying to blend with the eastbound traffic if that's the direction in which they want to go. Somebody else could be coming the other way. It's going to be a large safety concern. One of the things that concerns me most is during this process, the commission, this design does not meet the ULDC standards. And I know that when staff brings something to the commission that is not going to meet ULDC standards, the commission has to note that. They have to say, this does not meet ULDC and we're asking you to waive that. At no point that I can find anywhere in the minutes did the commission acknowledge that by adopting this particular plan, they do not meet ULDC requirements. That's our blueprint for growth in this city. When you say you're not going to plant any trees and you're not going to prioritize the safety of the streets and you're not going to do this, you're not going to do this, and you don't acknowledge that ULDC calls for it, but because of particular reasons we're not going to adhere to that, that's problematic because you leave a legacy that every other commission is going to have to follow and have to build upon. And when you fail to meet ULDC standards, our blueprint for how the city is supposed to be operated and run and built upon, that's a big problem going forward. And I would like you to be very careful when you approve the stormwater ponds that you make sure that they meet ULDC requirements when they are designed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have a public comment?
Him. Buddy Junior.
Put a knot in our rope right here. He just put a knot in our rope.
Justin Willis, Mongite Road. I have a board meeting this evening during your commission meeting, so I'm not going to be able to make it. I know this is completely not the time to be speaking about it, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to tell you guys that I'm hoping today during the consent agenda, you will add me back onto the Charter Review Board. If you have any questions or issues, feel free to reach out to me. I just didn't want to not be here to say thank you and that I didn't want to stay on the board. Thank you very much.
Put a knot in a rope. You've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Right.
Okay, apparently that doesn't
30
matter. All right, thank you. All right, we will move on to our consent agenda item. City Manager, did we have a request to pull any items for discussion on this consent agenda? Okay, wonderful. If I could have an approval of the consent agenda, that'd be great.
Weren't you gonna pull something?
At the main meeting.
Yeah,
not this
yeah,
one.
yeah, the main
It's the
one.
main meeting, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A and B as presented.
I have a motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Lill. Let's take a vote. And that passes unanimously. We'll move on to city business. US 41 signalized intersections, traffic signal poles and mast arms, painting, city center green. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As Ms. Belia works her way down here, this item, as it states, is related to the painting of the signal poles and mast arms to paint them at City Center green, which was brought up at commission request and the city agreement in order to do that. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Belia if she has anything she'd like to present to the commission on it.
Thank you, City Manager. For the record, Juliana Belia, Public Works Director. As the City Manager stated, during the City Commission regular meeting on November the 13th, 2018, the following inquiries were made by a resident. Number one, why are the new traffic signal poles and mast arms which have been installed in the segment of US 41 that is being widened not painted City Center green? And number two, why do the illuminated street name signs at these signalized intersections have a green background instead of a blue background? There was a consensus among the commission to have staff bring back at the closest road and drainage district meeting about changing the city center green street lights that are in place along US 41, as well as those that are yet to be put up, the blue lighted street signs, and the maintenance costs. So here today, I have some responses to the commission's requests. Following are the responses. First, an interlocal agreement is always required by the Florida State Department of Transportation anytime you paint the traffic signals. So if we are to paint them green, we have many interlocal agreements for most of our traffic signals along 41 that are currently green. So any new signals would also require the interlocal agreement, which is standard. And we are, of course, compensated for the maintenance of the lights pursuant to those agreements. Painting the signal poles and mast arms. We would have to hire, the city would need to hire through the Department of Public Works. We'd hire a contractor to paint the traffic signal poles and mast arms at 5 US 41 signalized intersections. And the estimated frequency of the repainting is every 5 years. That would be the cycle it would be put on. Maintenance costs. Estimated cost to initially paint the traffic signal poles and mast arms at the 5 locations is approximately $125,000. An escalation factor of 10% has been included for every 5 years to fund the repainting as well. Blue lighted street signs. The construction contractor that was hired by FDOT installed the green background colored signs at the signalized intersections at Selford, Cocoa Plum Village Shops, Home Depot entrance, and Sumter Boulevard instead of the blue background. We've already spoken with DOT, and their contractor is in process of making the correction to the correct blue illuminated signs. The fiscal impact is $125,000. As I've mentioned, to cover the repainting or the painting, as well as every 5-year cycle for the repainting costs. And so what we would need to do, should the commission so desire us to do it, is we would include that in our budget, proposed budget for fiscal year 2020. Are there any questions?
Before I move to questions here, I have one for you really quick. So we have 5 intersections, so am I to assume that's 5 lights, or is that going to be 10 lights? So if,
It depends on how many poles are at each intersection. So at 3 of the 4 poles at Sumter Boulevard and 41 would need to be painted green. One of the
3?
poles, yes, sir. One of the poles is currently green. It did not need to be replaced, so it would be 3 of the 4. 4 of the poles, and there's 4 at Sumter Crossings in US 41, all 4 would need to be painted green.
Sumter Crossings.
Yes, Sumter Crossings in US 41, that is by the Home Depot. Yes, ma'am. And the last one, 4 of the 4 poles, all of them, at Salford and 41, all of them would be 4. There's 4, all 4 of them would need to be painted green.
so there's 11.
There's 11 total, yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll move on to question.
3.
You have one?
Pardon me? 3.
There's some
City
down,
Clerk, I don't have, I think I've got just a normal iPad here. Nope, nothing gives me opportunity to show up who wants to talk on that.
Salford. What's the last 2?
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
No.
the city manager, there were 2 light poles that were just put in down at Island Walk, and there are some that are going to be going in at West Villages Parkway. Those are not green either, right?
Excuse me. Those are the other 2. I apologize. There's a total of 5. 3 are in town, and the other 2 are at West Villages. No, ma'am. The one at Corandino Boulevard in US 41 and Island Walk, that was put in as galvanized.
So how many poles are there?
Do we know? 4? There's 4 poles at the one in Corandino in West
So those would
Villages.
have to be painted too.
Yes, it's included in the 5 yes, that would need to be painted. And I'm trying to get with the developer before he puts up the one, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to, because that's not how it was approved, on the West Villages Parkway. Probably will not be able to, we'll have to do it. Those are included in the 5,
And how
for the
many,
125,000.
how many signal poles are at West Villages Parkway?
4 also? 4.
4 also?
4, yes, ma'am.
So we're looking at 16, 19 total poles.
Yes, ma'am.
Part of the problem is commission gave direction to not paint these poles when they were putting them in along 41, which then had a domino effect, correct, on the West Villages poles that just went in.
The reason they are not painted green is,
You're not to, right?
yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. We received, a couple of years back from the former planning division manager, we received an official interpretation with respect to the requirement for the city center green. The interpretation was that public infrastructure was not required, such as streetlights, were not required to be painted green. And that is what we've been going on since the time. And then also I received another interpretation recently from Mr. Frank Miles, the Neighborhood Development Services Director, the same interpretation. He asked that we review it on a case-by-case basis. Now, what had happened on November the 18th is the commission expressed concern in response to the resident and asked us to look into it and find out some costs to retrofit. And depending on the commission's direction, the next question would be, from here on out, should we be requiring all traffic signal poles and mast arms to be painted city center green? In which case, I would then ask Mr. Miles to do an amendment to the Land Development Code to make it a requirement.
So my question then is, right now, there is no code that says that the traffic poles on 41 have to be city center green.
Correct. The interpretation from the
It's
previous
not-
planning division manager and current neighborhood development services director is that public infrastructure is not required, such as a traffic signal, by the pattern book requirement, is not required to be painted city center green. Yes, ma'am.
But-
That's what's currently in the book.
So to just get a better understanding of what is required to be painted city center green, that would include like the scat bus stops, a bench, maybe a trash basket or something. Maybe the street lights that illuminate the sidewalks are supposed to be city center green, but not the traffic lights.
Correct.
Yes. I would defer to Mr. Miles or Ms. Galhouse, please, because that is in their land development code.
They'll be right down.
Hello, for the record, Nicole Gales, Planning Division Manager. The Urban Design Standards Pattern Book requires that exterior metal applications such as benches, bike racks, bus stops, light poles, those are all to be painted city center green when they're in the public right of way.
The what?
Urban Design Standards Pattern Book.
For that particular activity center.
For the activity centers in the public right of way, it's always city center green. When it's on private property, there's different colors in different activity centers.
But traffic lights with the mast arms, the red, yellow, green, those traffic lights do not have to be painted city center green.
That was Frank Miles, Director of Neighborhood Development Services. That was the prior precedent back in 2016. That was the finding, and I concurred with that finding as well.
Because those are FDOT. They're not, it's FDOT stuff. It's not city stuff.
Could you say that?
Is that
Well,
fair?
it's a little bit trickish because it's a street light that either a developer or the city of Northport will install and pay for and have erected in the state right of way. So it is the city's in the end. It will become the city's responsibility. Now, you have the option when you enter into an interlocal, you're going to get funding to help maintain that signal in their right of way. You're going to get DOT money for that, should you enter into the interlocal. Now, if you choose not to do that, you won't get the funding. When you have it painted, you have to enter into an interlocal with DOT.
And the DOT still provides some of that funding?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Even with the
When
painting?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. When you enter into a interlocal with DOT, they will provide you with a certain amount of funding toward the maintenance of that signal. Now, the other positive of this is many of the signals, of course not the newer ones, but many of our signals are older on US 41, for example. DOT has been very generous with us in providing us with a lot of parts that they no longer need because they have a lot of new signals throughout Florida. So it's a very good relationship to help us, compensation, if you will, in addition to the monetary compensation. We're getting some equipment out of the arrangement as well.
All the questions I have now.
How much assistance do we get per lamp, per pole? Do we know that?
For maintenance.
It's a percentage.
Yes, for maintenance.
The maintenance we
I'm
would
just
get
trying to,
anyways.
well, I'm just trying to see what that deferred cost
How much,
is.
but the maintenance we would get regardless.
Well, yeah, but it's an amount. I'm just trying to understand what that deferred cost is compared to what our cost is, and then what that leaves us with.
No, but the maintenance has nothing to do with painting the poles. The maintenance has to do with changing the red bulbs or the green bulbs or activating the,
Well, then that's a whole nother question.
exactly, it's not maintenance like painting maintenance.
Well, then that's a whole nother question. So are you able to apply some of those funds to the painting maintenance, or is that excluded?
They give us, the DOT gives us a percentage amount, and I'm having it researched right now what that number is, the percentage. And that money is for us to maintain. They don't tell us you can only use it for light. In fact, the agreement specifies certain things, but if we want to use it for the painting of it, we can. Whatever maintenance is required. Now, if, for example, if somebody hits the pole, we've had this in the past, they're very good about it. They've come down here and assisted us with, if it's a major repair, the pole gets knocked down or this or that, they'll come down. When we didn't have, for example, electrician on staff, we'd have to get a contractor, they'd help us out there. They'd bring us parts if they had spare parts we didn't have. It's a very good relationship. The difference is when you paint that pole, you're required. And now they actually have a separate agreement just for the painted poles, if you will. But yes, they give you a set amount of money, and it's up to you how you use it for your maintenance.
Thank you. Commissioner Luke?
Yeah, that's a question that I'll wait for the answer for too, because to me that's very important to figure out how much you're given versus like 25,000 per intersection. How does painting the poles in the intersections in West Village affect those citizens? I mean, are they gonna be charged because they have dues, that they pay toward the maintenance of their roads and stuff? Does this tax them with any further monies?
No, ma'am. No, not from the city's perspective.
So once the
It's the
city,
maintenance of the traffic signal.
once the city would do that, they then would take over the maintenance of those?
Yes, ma'am. We are going to, it's an added maintenance cost. If we paint our signals, it's an added maintenance cost to the city. So through their methodology, they're going to pay for a signal, whether it's painted or it's galvanized. It's going to be part of their assessment. We're not going to increase the assessment unless through the methodology, we get it down to that fine detail. Did it increase? And right now, we've not looked at that part of it.
Okay, because that would play into it too if you're
Right.
increasing somebody's, because that's
Now, what would
that's not
happen though in the
fair.
future is if we're going to do it in this fashion, retrofitting's one thing. But if we're going to, for future, require all new signals to be painted green, city center green, then we will have to have it in the land development code. And then the initial painting will be the responsibility of the developer when they construct it initially.
Okay. How much do we pay currently to maintain those green poles that we have?
Do you know what we pay? When we have them repainted?
I mean, were they powder?
We haven't gone to paint.
Were they powder?
Currently, we
powder-coated
haven't
originally?
we haven't repainted any of the green painted signal poles on 41. We haven't done that yet. This is the first time we've gone out to get quotes and estimates of what it would cost us to repaint them. Paint them initially and then repaint them every 5 years.
Well, how long have they been installed?
Bingo.
Many years. Some of them probably 20 years, some less.
They've never been repainted?
No.
And I believe when this was brought up in 2016 or so, it was a 6-year span to paint instead of 5 years.
I would have to go back into the history, since Mr. Speak has been here, he has not repainted any. I would have to go back and look at each signal to find out when we repainted them. If we did and when we did. I'd have to research that.
Okay, so when you're talking about pretty much 25,000 per intersection, that's quite a bit just for green paint. When we don't have lights, throughout the city and sidewalks throughout the city, 25,000 can go, 125 can go a long way. What is the cost difference between maintaining the galvanized versus the painted? And how much is the difference between the installation of the two?
You mean the installation of a green painted pole versus a galvanized pole?
Yes.
I'd have to research that.
Okay, and then is there a cost difference to maintain those two poles? Obviously so, because one's
It's a
being
ma-
painted.
yes,
The
ma'am, it
galvanized
would
is
be.
good from here on, correct? Galvanized shouldn't rust.
What I'd have to find out for you is the life cycle of the galvanized and if there's any type of treatment other than paint that would be applied. I will research that.
Okay.
Go with 20 years.
And do you know, this is my final question on this, do you know, how did the green ones that we have now, how did they get green? Were they ordered that way? Were they powder coated, before putting up? Were they painted afterwards? How'd they get green?
When we widened Sumter Boulevard, we replaced the poles with green poles, green painted poles.
We bought them that way.
And the same thing at Biscayne and 41.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, because this was one of our first meetings on the
It was
board.
before I came on.
Yes, I believe,
Have them done initially was,
$42,000.
yeah, but it was less than having to come back and repaint if that's what you wanted to do. That's why we had to make a decision. Which way do you want to go? Because the cost difference was way different. Your son?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I didn't understand the activities center comment. That activity centers are not required to have the city center green, especially the activity center that's designated along US 41.
I believe, and Mr. Miles is coming up, what we were discussing is, we had asked for official interpretation back in 2016. If a traffic signal was to be considered outside furniture and traffic infrastructure, if that would be required, and at that time it was activity center number 2, would that be required to be painted city center green? The interpretation from the planning division manager said, no. A traffic signal is considered public infrastructure, and that would not be required to be painted city center green. Mr. Miles, recently in January 2018, we also asked for a official interpretation, and he supported the former planning division manager's position.
I get that. That's not my question.
Okay.
My question is, well, first of all, I don't agree that a traffic infrastructure is not traffic signal. So
Okay.
because I know what the intent was. Remember, I was here.
Right.
And it was bloat that required that activity center to have the city center green. So that's another story. But anyways, my point is that, where am I going with this? The activity center itself has a pattern book and has requirements. What you're trying to say is that it says that traffic infrastructure is supposed to be city center green in that pattern book, but the determination is that the traffic infrastructure is not a traffic signal? Is that what the determination is?
Again, Frank Miles, Neighborhood Development Services Director. I think as the interpretation was provided previously, and what I supported as well, was it more has to do with the architectural details, the various design requirements for each activity center. They have their own. But the city center green had to do with the public amenities such as the trash cans, the outdoor seating, etc. The view that the public infrastructure piece, which would be the traffic poles, they would not fall under that requirement. But again,
What does it say?
I can read it if you like.
go ahead, yes.
Excuse me, Frank. The adopted urban design standards pattern book has specific design styles and guidelines for each activity center. The design components are specific to architectural style, public art, street furniture, street lighting, clock towers, water features, pavement treatment, street trees, trash receptacles, and buried utilities, transit shelters, walking/fitness paths, water fountains, bike paths, pavilions, gazebos, smoking urns, and planters. The color schemes are established for public urban amenities, are all city center green. For Activity Center 1, which is the area of your inquiry, the pattern book states that, and I assume the verbiage is why some developers were mandated to paint this signal mast arms green, all steel and aluminum shall be painted or anodized, all wood shall be painted or stained, ornament and trim colors shall be compatible and harmonious with the building colors. The color of all outside furniture and metal located in this activity center shall be city center green. Finding, the guidelines for public amenities to be city center green are for wayfinding such as benches, furniture, streetlights, and so forth. A traffic signal is not an urban amenity or a wayfinding feature. The term outside furniture and metal is construed to be of a like nature as outdoor furniture, and traffic infrastructure are not one and the same. In addition, where all steel and aluminum is to be painted is part of the language pertaining to the on-site architectural details of a development site and not public rights of way. Therefore, I find that the Urban Design Standards Pattern Book does not consider traffic signal mast arms to be included in an urban outdoor street furniture. It would be public infrastructure. And would
Okay,
therefore,
so-
and they would therefore not be required to be city center green. That would be solely at the discretion of the city. That was that opinion of Michelle and then also Mr. Miles.
So I heard three things. Urban design standards would include lighting, utilities, and public urban amenities? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it would be public art, street furniture, street lighting, clock towers, water features, pavement treatment, street trees, trash receptacles, buried utilities, transit shelters, walking.
Buried utilities?
Mhm.
So we got to color buried utilities? How's that happen?
Prior
Okay.
to burying them.
Right?
Transit
Sorry.
shelters, walking/fitness paths, water fountains, bike paths, pavilions/gazebos, smoking urns, and patterns.
Where was the public something? Public urban, public something?
There was public art.
Oh, art,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
didn't hear
Public
you
art.
right.
Mhm.
I'm going deaf. Okay. So we got utilities, urban lighting, were addressed. All right. So the next question is that just because the recommendation is 5 years, we don't have to maintain it every 5 years. We can make it every 10 years, we can make it every 7 years, we can make it every 1 year, correct?
As needed.
As needed, right?
Our professional recommendation is every 5, but the commission, you can always tell us
Okay.
you would prefer it to be done a different amount of time. Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't think those were ever repainted, and they've been up since 2002 or 2003.
We may have painted them once, possibly, but that's the only time I can remember. And I don't know about all of them, maybe just some of them, but I will check. I will check.
Okay. All right, so then the other thing is you're talking about to do all 19, we're talking about 475,000, right?
125,000. The
No, for
initial
5,
repainting.
right?
Five initial repainting, yes, ma'am.
Right, is 125,000.
125,000,
So if we
yes,
did
ma'am.
all 19, it would be 470.
Excuse me, 5 intersections.
Thank
19
you.
poles.
Okay, so we're
5
talking about 100,
intersections, 19 poles, 19?
right?
Yes,
So we're
ma'am.
we're talking about 125,000 total.
Total for 19 poles, yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, okay.
At 5 signalized intersections.
Okay, at $125,000, how much foot do you get in sidewalk for $125,000? What would be the feet, or this, I think it's square footage, or, well, we have budget, so I would assume you guys know this, because say we ask for 7 miles, you should know how much it is per square foot.
I know how much it is per square foot.
Okay, how much is it?
I can do roughly 11,000 square feet of flat work of sidewalk, 4-inch sidewalk.
For 125,000. Okay, so 11,000 square feet is equivalent to what?
That is the question.
Come on, man.
For the engineer.
You're an engineer. You should know this right here. No.
It depends how wide the sidewalk is.
I'm only kidding.
4
Okay.
foot. 4
No,
foot
what's the normal?
Okay, 5.
5. Okay, so let's just do minimum, 5 feet. I'm going to go with half a mile. You're close. That's what I'm going to go with, half a mile,
Quarter mile.
which is about probably 4 blocks, 5 blocks, if that.
Got 200 linear feet.
20 is,
Okay.
I love it. Okay, go ahead,
The
what do you
engineer
think?
says approximately 2,300 feet of sidewalk.
2,300 feet, linear feet, right?
Correct. 5 foot wide.
5 foot wide, 230 feet, which is what, about
2,300.
I'm sorry, 2,300 feet, which is about
Correct.
a little bit less than a half a mile, which is what, about 6
5,280.
blocks? Maybe roughly 5, 6 blocks of sidewalk.
How many blocks? Jerry? Yes,
Jerry
David.
Traverso, Engineering Division Manager. That is Chuck's estimate of just flat work. Now, when you're gonna build a sidewalk, it depends the location. You might have to add piping for the swales. You might have to regrade the swale. So that 2,300 linear feet might get down to 1,800. So it depends. It's project specific. There might be projects that we just do some clear and grubbing, remove the grass, flat work, and off we go. There are other locations that might be more complicated that will require more drainage, more regrading. So it depends on the location of the sidewalk.
Let me ask you, do we have any of those perfect locations like that in the city?
We have a couple that we're working with the CDBG grant that we got, and we're filling those little gaps. And we have a lot of locations that we can put sidewalk, but we will have to actually do a field review and look and see.
How much was Eldron? What was the total?
Oh, that
of
was a special. It was close to $1 million. Now, that one required a lot of drainage. It was a lot of full front of ditches to provide the location for the sidewalk.
Okay.
Commissioner, can I move on to another question and then come back?
Okay, so we made it clear that it was 125,000 for all 5 intersections, not poles, right? Okay. I'm good. Go ahead.
Vice Mayor?
I just have one question. Currently, if we were to go ahead and say, yes, not saying that we're doing this, but if we were to change our mind and say, yes, paint these poles, is this currently in the budget?
That would be the
It's
city
not in
manager.
my operations budget, no.
No?
No.
So timeline to get a agreement with FDOT and procure the contractor to paint these poles? What kind of time frame are we talking about?
I don't think you guys get the agreement.
Next year's budget?
Well, we're gonna have the agreement, we already have, we're gonna have the agreement with FDOT, whether we paint them or not. And I stand corrected, the agreement does not include the paint. We're not gonna be able to use the money for the paint.
Thank
We
you.
get about $4,876 per intersection from DOT toward the maintenance.
Could you repeat that number again, please?
Yes, we receive approximately $4,876 per intersection from DOT for the maintenance
Maintenance.
of the signal.
But that does not include
No, ma'am,
repainting.
it is clear we are not allowed to use it for the repainting. We have to have the interlocal because we painted it, but we're not allowed to use it toward the painting.
But again, we don't know how much we've spent the last 20 years, so. 0.
So I'm just, I didn't hear the answer, is how long to procure and,
It's a new thing. If I can clarify something also, all the signals that we have along 41, including the one coming up at Corandino and including the West Villages, we have already discussed with DOT, and we are going to have interlocals with them for that, regardless of whether we paint them or not. They now have something new, DOT. It's a separate agreement for those signals that are painted. Any brand new ones. So if we were to require West Villages Parkway or Corandino Boulevard, those are only 2 brand new ones, we'd be entered into the equation. We'd have to have also a separate agreement for the painted signals, just specific to the painting.
so So at some point, this is again going to the if we go ahead and paint these green,
Yes, ma'am.
and Prado Boulevard needs a intersection, traffic signals, who pays for that? To paint it green?
If we require it in the land development code, or the interpretation gets changed, that we currently have, and it's prior to the development order being issued, then it would be the developer. For example, now that the signal is already up, obviously at Corandino, we can't make the developer make that green.
Right.
The poles are actually been delivered to the intersection at West Villages Parkway. However, there's issues because there's utility line conflicts and a water main has to be relocated. So that signal is not going to be put up for a while, but they've already got approval in their development order. So in both those cases, the city would have to pay for the green paint of those two signals.
So let's fast forward to Prado Boulevard, because logically, there's going to be a signalized intersection there.
Yes, ma'am.
And if we did all of those steps.
Yes, ma'am.
And it needs to be painted green.
The
who
developer would pay.
pays?
Yes, ma'am.
So now we created another problem. If we go through with this, because the developer says, I didn't have to pay for these two, why am I have to paying for this one?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's,
Because the code changed, yes, ma'am.
They did pay for the painting of West Villages already.
Is that on all kinds of codes?
yeah.
They painted that one black?
I think it's black.
So
Oh, I asked Nicole.
can I get an answer about the procurement and how long this would take?
How long would the procurement, I apologize, how long would the procurement
First of
take?
all, how long for the agreement?
The agreement is going to be coming before you, I believe, at the next meeting, and we've already included the two new signals.
But what about painting green?
If we paint them green, we'd have to have 2 additional agreements, and that would, however long it takes with DOT, usually about a month. We can have that, we receive it from DOT, process it before commission. So I would say about 2 to 3 months before the 2 new painting agreements for the signals would come back to you.
And as far as the procurement side, first it'd have to be budgeted. You can't procure it until it's budgeted. So we
Right.
would include it in our plan would be to include it in next year's budget, if the commission tells us to move forward with this. Which means the budget will take effect in October 1. Procurement normally is about 90 days.
Okay.
So now you're talking till January,
So we
and
can
then
actually leave it like
I don't know how long it takes them to actually paint,
Yeah, 2 to 3 months.
about 2 to 3 months after that. So you're looking realistically almost a year from now before they'd be painted.
Thank you.
If I can also make a clarification on something, I was just informed that the signals at the poles and mast arms at West Villages Park, Corandino Boulevard, or excuse me, West Villages Parkway are painted black already.
That's what I was going to ask.
Not Corandino, West Villages Parkway.
Why would they be painted black? Who authorized it to be painted black?
Oh, boy.
Island Walks, mast arms painted black. I never thought you would have a conversation for almost an hour about painting signal lights. This is,
Oh, Joe.
Hello. For the record again, Nicole Galehouse, Planning Division Manager. So the West Villages area is not governed by the Urban Design Standards pattern book. They're governed by their own pattern books and their pattern plans. All of their streetlights are to be black.
okay, so
Right.
is the intersection mast arm at Island Walk, is that black?
I believe they
I
all are.
don't know.
I could have sworn they were.
You're speaking about Corandino Boulevard, the one that's currently up by Island Walk and 41? We will have it double checked, but I believe they're galvanized. I don't think those are black.
So if,
I will have to check.
Everything is for their streetlights. I don't have specific language for the traffic signals, but they don't typically use city center green in the West Villages.
okay.
Of course not.
So if their pattern book says that their mast arm has to be black,
It does not. It says their streetlights have to be black.
why is the mast arm painted black, is the question.
I'd have to look into the history of it.
Said
I
you believe they
don't-
were galvanized, and I'm trying to think going through, I think they're galvanized.
No,
She said-
some are the
No,
one,
I'm talking about the
brand
one
new
on 41 that they just put up.
This just proves nobody knows and nobody really pays attention to what color mast arms are on signal lights.
Yeah,
Every one of
ones that- The ones that are existing are galvanized. The ones that are not existing yet, they're sitting on the side of the road somewhere, I can tell you what color they are, because
Well, they're laying down.
They're black.
I drive by too fast. At 45, it's not what I'm looking at the light on the side of the road.
Thank you. This is ridiculous.
Once it's installed, I'll see it.
My question would be, are they really painted black, or is it covered to protect the galvanization before it's
No,
delivered?
that would be painted. They're either galvanized or they're painted a color. They're black.
Okay.
Commissioner Kirsten?
So how many, you said that 3 of the 5 were in West Villages that were a
No,
part
two.
of you?
2.
2 of the 5?
Yes, ma'am, 2 of the
Okay.
5. That would be Corondino Boulevard and West Villages Parkway.
Okay, so if we only did the 2 of them that were within the activity center that's supposed to be painted city center green.
That's 3. There's a total of 5.
Sorry, 3.
That's okay.
How much is that?
75,000.
It would be 75,000. It's 25,000 in intersection, so it would be 75,000 instead of 125,000.
Okay, so now, my question is to city manager. At 75,000, is it possible to find 75,000 to do the appropriations with a budget amendment for this year, that's within that budget, to just get the activity center handled?
We can look and see what's available in fund balance, or what kind of savings we've identified already. I can't promise that right now. We'll have to look.
I know we have several employees that are not here, so, that were budgeted for.
I mean, there's a good chance the answer is yes, but I don't want to promise something without looking into it.
Okay, so let's say theoretically, you find the 75,000. You do the not the appropriation,
We'd need an agreement, which takes about a month. Then we
yeah,
need
I know, the FDOT
procurement,
agreement's
which
gonna
is about
happen.
90 days, and then we said about 2
Procurement.
months, 2 to 3 months.
Okay, so the procurement is done, say, in this cycle. I'm thinking 6 months,
About
right?
6 months from now.
Okay, so 6 months from now puts us at where?
End of October.
There you go. I'm done.
Good? Okay.
Wait,
Have
public
a-
comment.
Yep, I have nobody else, so I'm going to move on to a public comment. Mr. Willis?
Justin Willis, Mongite Road. I actually sat in the commission meeting, I want to tell you of 17 during the commission meeting, and it was the intent of the commission that all poles down Sumter, Toledo Blade, and 41 would be city center green. That was done by Rue Berryman, Dick Lockhart, Barbara Gross, David Garofalo, and Vanessa Carazone. That was, right, it was Garofalo, I believe. That was the intent of what they wanted, was for it to be the city center green on those poles. It was brought in by FDOT and said, we will put up the green poles. It'll cost you $40,000. You guys felt $40,000 was too much at the time, when it's about the aesthetics of our community. It's about setting a standard in Northport, and that was the intent of what they were trying to do. What is the warranty period on the paint job that's there? Is it 3 years? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? It's, why are we paying out, why are we looking at this like it's a big thing? We spend out money on getting research done or go and investigate this, and then we ignore them for $150,000, but whenever it comes to street poles, we're making it seem like this is a whole lot of money. This is about setting a standard within our community. People know when they come into Northport, it's green street poles, blue street signs. It's been that way for more than 20 years. And as far as repainting the poles, I know of one pole in my lifetime that has been repainted, and if I remember correctly, it was at the corner of Salford and 41, and it was repainted after an accident because of the amount of damage that was done to it. Other than that, the street poles that were at 41, I can pretty much guarantee you were never painted because they were starting to flake at the bottom where the rust was getting to them, and that was on there. I mean, if we were painting them, that rust would not have been visible. So they were not getting painted. This is about setting a standard for our city. Please do not look at $125,000 for the standards and compare them to sidewalks. These are apples and oranges. If we're going to discuss sidewalks, we need to pull in a grant writer and have them raise money to do some of these things. So that way we're not sitting here complaining about how much money we're spending. Let's spend $75,000 on a grant writer and make sure that we're bringing in the money that's necessary for these kinds of things. Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
All right, I'm ready to entertain it.
I'll move to direct staff to find $75,000
I
to
think you've got another.
paint. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know there was another one.
He was just walking up as you started to speak. I didn't know, are you wanting to speak about this item?
Yep. Yeah, but everybody else, put it in your card or hold your peace. This is the last
Right.
one.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're fine.
Steve Nappy, Fairlane Drive. Just a couple of quick points. DOT got rid of painting mast arms because it's a pain. I can give you a couple examples. If you look at Collier County, they have to repaint them. I was involved in a project down there. We had to do all the intersections. It's a lot of money, but it is pretty. So the question here is, do you guys want it to be pretty and incur those costs or not? I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Going back to the warranty, DOT, if they do have a painted mast arm, it's a 5-year warranty. So anything before 5 years is their responsibility. Anything after that is the city. So their assessment of 5 years is a good one. You may go 10 years, 15 years, like you guys are saying, but it could be 5 years. And the big thing with the painting on galvanized, it's not so bad when it's been weathered because it's already started oxidizing. A lot of times when you put them in new, the oxidation started, and then they paint, and then it bubbles up, and that's how you have these issues. That was Collier County, Kissimmee. If you see those purple, ugly painted poles, that's what happened there. This would be a retrofit, so all the oxidation would be good. It would be a fresh paint, but it comes with its inherent dangers. But again, it's what you want, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner?
Okay, direct staff to allocate $75,000 for a budget amendment for this year to paint only the three streetlight intersections
Yes, ma'am.
within the activity center along US 41, City Center Green, and to procure as soon as that goes through, and then repaint as needed.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Carusone, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Commissioner Carusone?
So first of all, the only reason why I took out West Villages is because I do believe that they have their own pattern book, and the City Center Green is really related to the activity centers within the core of the city. It's not related to outside, just like Panacea. You won't see the same color in Panacea. You won't see the same color in the Yorkshire area. But the key to City Center Green was supposed to be US 41 Sumter Corridor. So that was the intent. So that's why I took out the West Village portion of it. And it also brings us down to $75,000, which I know that we can find within savings. We have a ton of savings in all departments, not just in projects and items that have not been done, that'll be carried over next year, but employees that have not been hired, or that they no longer are here, but yet we're still have the full amount of salary budgeted for the year. So I'm not worried about the $75,000. Having us repaint as needed is kind of what what we did the last time, And yes, at some point, the galvanized, green painted street poles were starting to bubble and starting to crack, and they only needed touch-up paint, because most of those were at the base of the poles, so, you know, and that lasted, I want to say 20 years. I don't believe Garofalo was here, but you got a better memory than me, because you are way younger. So I do think that it's worth listening to the public commenter about what's the warranty. Usually any paint will have a warranty, so whatever it is, or whoever you hire, and by the way, the city would be the ones who'd have to hire the painting company, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right,
That is
okay.
correct.
So
That's
it wouldn't have
correct.
anything to do with FTOT.
No,
It
ma'am.
would be internally. Okay, so whatever the warranty is on that particular product that's being used is probably essential to what you put in the procurement. So there's that. The reason why I feel it's so important is the same reason why I voted against the denial of the $40,000. I have been far and wide in this state, and I've actually been to other states, that the number one thing that people will say to me is that the entry signs to the city, the colors of the street signs, and the pavers in the main streetways, and the landscape upgrades that we have worked so hard for, are the number one thing they remember about our city, and it gives them a positive reflection. We are working diligently to change our impression on everyone statewide. And I feel like we are degrading what we are capable of by limiting ourselves to less than. We've set a standard. This was a community-driven initiative. This is not something that the commission just chose one day to paint everything green. This was actually a community-driven initiative by the people along US 41 corridor. I cannot in good conscience say that this is not worthy of $75,000, which is not even going to get you a third of a half mile of sidewalk. I just can't. So that's why.
Seconder?
No, I agree with Commissioner Carousel, and I think we need to stay in the hub of the city at this point and not venture out to West Villages, because you're talking about galvanized, you're talking about black poles. What if we put black and green poles out there?
Yeah.
I would just leave that alone and reassess that down the road and just keep it in the town with our uniqueness and keep the green down US 41. So I agree.
Vice Mayor?
2 points. West Villages is part of the city of Northport. West Villages is on 41. And if we are going to make this a community standard, it should follow all the way through. But it's not. I feel that $75,000 can go a long way to putting benches at the SCAT bus stops, maybe putting streetlights in areas where people are screaming to have streetlights put in. I don't know this comparison with sidewalks and signal arms. I don't get that. But there's other things that $75,000 can do that are amenities for the citizens that are screaming for those kind of things in our city. I voted against this in 2017, and for the exact same reasons. It's on 41. There's no pavers on 41. And if you're talking about aesthetics, those aesthetics are absolutely necessary on Sumter and Toledo Blade. But on 41, nobody is paying attention to the street lights and traffic signals, what colors they are. They're trying to get from point A to point B in a 3 or 4 lane road that is just a thoroughfare. It is not the amenities that were spoken about as far as the pavers and everything else. I just cannot support this. There's other things we can be doing with that money that the citizens want to have done.
Commissioner Luke?
I like aesthetics, but again, if the city were completely where it needed to be with infrastructure, lighting, sidewalks, everything else, then aesthetics would play more of a big deal to me. I want to uphold the interpretations that have been given in the past to this, and currently is the same interpretation. I want to stay and keep that interpretation of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to clarify a couple of things. First and foremost, when I speak of the pavers, I wasn't speaking of US 41. I was saying in totality, people are saying that our design standards are what they love about the city of Northport. And just for clarification, US 41 may go all the way to West Villages, but West Villages is regulated by their own pattern book. And it has nothing to do with the activity center of 41 that we're speaking of. So every single place has its own pattern, its own standards, its own aesthetic design to it. And if we want to, stick with what the community desired, then we need to maybe look back historically, that's all.
So I thought about this. I actually voted against coloring the poles in one of our first meetings. I've also stipulated that was one of my regrets. Whenever I look at things, I have an OCD towards certain things. When I drive down, I see odd colored stuff that messes with me. That being said, that doesn't necessarily demand that you spend money to fix things. That being said, appearance does matter, and it matters to every single person in this city. This is why we wash our cars. It's why we paint our houses. It's why we do the trim a different color, so things are noticeable. When I look at our budget and I look at what's being requested here, I see this as a reasonable appropriation of funds. And as such, I am going to support it because of that. So we can move on to the vote. That passes 3-2. Commissioner or Vice Mayor McDowell, do you have anything to that?
I already stated the reasons why I dissented.
Commissioner Luke, reason stated, or do you have something else you'd like to say?
Reason stated, wanted to stay with the interpretation staff had given.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
If this is what is going to be done, and we have to repaint these poles every 5 years or as needed, whatever that is defined as, and West Villages, well, we're not, forget it, we're not doing the green poles down in West Villages.
All right. Do I have any public comment? No? We'll do commission communication.
But I do have one more to
Please,
that.
go ahead.
I would suggest that maybe we need to make a motion to direct staff to require any development from this point forward within the US 41 corridor and that specific activity center to be the same city center green, just so we have consistency and clarity.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion, I guess.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion on the floor by by Commissioner Carusone, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Commissioner Carusone, you good?
Yeah, I just want it, I don't want somebody coming in and galvanizing when everything else is city center.
Well, we'd have to fix it all along.
Back and
Exactly, and then we'd have to come back and keep
And
paying
do
for
it
it.
and keep going and keep going. Let's do it right.
Yeah.
May I make a suggestion that we include that in the pattern book as far as a requirement, so it won't be left up to interpretation, rather than just require the developer?
However it needs
Thank
to
you.
be done,
Thank you.
absolutely. I'm
Thank you.
sorry I didn't clarify
Attorney,
that.
we all good with the way we're rolling this thing through here?
That's fine, you can have staff bring it back, or direct staff to include it every time, but with respect to approving pattern plans and regulations for particular
That
developments or
needs to be
changes
a-
of code, you have to go through the entire.
Right.
PZEB process and hearing before you go
Right.
twice. But what I'm hearing you saying is you want staff to be including that.
Correct. However that needs to be brought back, I know something has to be brought back to make it clear.
Okay.
So yes, that's included. Do I need to make another motion, city clerk? Or an amendment to my motion?
If you would, I think so.
Just
Make an
restate
amendment,
it.
or do you want to restate it? Just restate it would be all right?
If you would like to withdraw your second, Commissioner Emmerich, and you would like to restate, we can do that too.
Okay,
That
so,
might be easier.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, go ahead and remove, yeah.
So I will move to have staff bring back whatever means necessary to require the street lighting within the US 41 corridor and activity center to be city center green. And when I say street lighting, I mean traffic signals and intersection signals and any other word signal you want to use to identify it as having lights on it, as well as the signs.
The signs are going to be blue.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And the pedestrian poles,
Yes.
crossings, green.
You got it.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a second.
Yeah, I have a second.
Motion on the floor
Oh,
by
sorry.
Commissioner Carasone, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich.
Before you call the vote, Mayor, I don't know if you want to
I
hear
will.
public comment.
I will. Before I call the vote, we will hear Buddy Jr., also known as Justin Willis. That's what he wrote.
I just wanted to tell you guys, that Justin Willis, tell you thank you very much. This is something, it's apparently people in the city did care enough that it made it onto the agenda. So to say that the citizens don't care about the colors of street poles, it wouldn't be on here if we didn't care and bring it to the commission. So we do very much care. So please don't negate us on that because we do care what's happening on 41. Besides that, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm leaving.
I'm hoping C.
Let's
saying.
take a vote. And that passes unanimously.
Okay.
We will move on. We will not do commission communications. We'll save that for the next round.
Yep.
Administrative and legal will do the same. So now we're moving on to 8, meeting adjourned. That's how we roll.
I like 8.
Always like 8.
8 is my favorite number.
8.
Now.
All right.
Remind me of that chicken
Okay.
grease.
Amber,